Hello and welcome to another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show, where this week we are ecstatic to have Coach Dain Thompson on the program. Coach Thompson just retired as the head football coach at Poston Butte, took the Broncos to heights that I don't think too many people imagined. Multiple region championships, a state championship game appearance, and is just a heck of a coach. Was also, prior to that, an assistant with Arizona legend Paul Morrow and was a part of many state championships, and is just a fantastic guy, really good resource, great coach for any young coach or old coach or any coach to learn from. I certainly learned a lot from him. I coached with Coach Thompson at Poston Butte in 2016. Outstanding football coach, really excited to have him on. Incidentally, he also has, and I've coached a lot of really good players and a lot of players that I thought played hard, but I think his son is definitely still one of my favorites. Played as hard as anybody I can remember and was just a stud football player as well. So we're really excited to have Coach on the show, and we're going to dive into some wing tee and Veer type topics, maybe blending those two a little bit and trying to do things within your system to give your team the best chance out on the field on Friday night. But before we do that, I want to take a moment to let you guys know, please like and subscribe. We're inching closer up on the likes and subscribes, and the reason we want that is the primary goal of this program is just to reach as many coaches as possible and hopefully grow the coaching profession as much as we can. We've certainly had a lot of outstanding guests that have taught us a lot, and it's absolutely free, so make sure you take some time to like and subscribe, retweet. We're on Twitter. Eventually we'll be on some of those other forms of social media, but not quite yet. Also want to remind everybody that the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show is sponsored by School Funder. School Funder, the only online fundraising company in America where you can keep all of the money your team raises minus the small 3% credit card processing fee. Sound too good to be true? I can tell you firsthand that it is true. Last year we used them for a lift-a-thon that we were going to do anyway, and in a few short weeks raised $12,000, and we kept all of that money, just like I said, minus that 3% processing fee. Many other companies would take upwards of 20%. We would have spent up to $2,000 paying them out, and you wouldn't give 20% of your team's wins away, so why give away 20% of the profits they earn? So please, schoolfunder.org. That's SCHOOLFUNDR.org, and please tell them the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show sent you. All right, so we're going to get into the topic at hand, and Coach Thompson, I want you to take a little bit and tell us about your football story.
Well, thanks, Cody, for having me here, and Tyler, thank you guys. It's cool to be on this. I haven't done this before, so I'm a rookie. I've been doing this for a long time. I just finished my 33rd year of teaching and coaching high school football in Arizona, all in public schools. So I've been doing this for a while. As you alluded to earlier, I was very fortunate. I've worked with some really good coaches. I learned from a lot of different types of styles and people when I was first coming up, student teaching. Did part of my student teaching with Howard Brining, who was the head football coach at Saguaro Tucson at the time, and learned a ton from him. And then kind of went on my own. I got my first teaching job up in Holbrook, Arizona, and coached for a few different coaches up there, and eventually got my first head coaching job there. I was not anywhere near ready to take that on, but there was a need there, and so I was the one that kind of filled that need that they had, and that was in the kind of the mid 90s. I was fortunate enough, once I got married, met my wife, and we started having kids, and I was fortunate enough to be able to move back to my hometown where our family was up in Pine Top, Arizona, and got to coach with my high school coach, Coach Morrow, who has some legendary stats that you kind of mentioned earlier, and just learned a ton from him and the assistant coaches there too as well. We had some really good veteran assistant coaches and some young guys too that the kind of energy that they brought kind of helped me define who I was as a coach. Paul decided to move down to the Valley to take his wife into some warmer weather, and me and my family decided to follow him down to Phoenix, and that's where we wound up at Poston Butte. And then a couple years later, I was introduced to you, Cody, and got to know you and some of the guys that you brought on board. And, and then from that point on, after you moved back up to Prescott, then I took over the Poston Butte job, and I've been there for, I was there for 11 years and then, or 12 years, and then 9 of those as the head coach. So, and then this last year, over Christmas break, I thought the program was in a good position, and I made some family choices to make sure that I could free up some time to devote back to my wife, who's been the greatest, football wife of all time, and my family and parents and things like that. As I got older, obviously they get older too. So freeing my time back up and giving up that head coaching job was probably one of the best things that I decided to do outside of football. And I say that because football is such a big part of my life. Stepping away from it, was a difficult decision, but really, in the big scheme of things, it wasn't that hard because it was the right thing to do for me at the time. So that's where I'm at right now, and I'm still super involved. Love the game. Just had to find a way to give some time back to my family, and so stepping down. Of course, here at Poston Butte, my story doesn't end because one of your assistant coaches, and then one of my assistant coaches, Coach Holmes, took over the program. So we have some great connections with Coach Holmes, who's now been named the head coach there, and he's find a way to bring me back in to help out with the freshmen a little bit. So I'll be working in the mornings a little bit with the freshmen going forward. So that's where I'm at right now.
I think that's the kind of the ultimate goal. Maybe I want to get to where I'm at. You know the scene in American in Beauty where he gets the severance package, Kevin Spacey's character, and then he goes into the burger joint he worked when he was a teenager and says, "I want the job with the least amount of responsibility possible." Like I think eventually that's what I want to do is be an assistant with the least, still get to be around the game, coach kids, and have fun with it. But anytime there is anything parent complaint or AD issue or something like that, I would just go, "Well, you guys have fun with that, and I'll be over." So
Exactly. And I'm going to do my best to make sure that when I'm doing the freshmen, that I do everything I can to make sure I get a chance to work with the offensive line.
Absolutely. Those guys I maintain are the most fun to coach.
Yeah.
Absolutely the most fun to coach. All right, so we're going to get into a little bit of the topic at hand. Coach, you've always done a really good job, I think, of blending some wing T concepts, both in the shotgun and under center. Definitely a big buck sweep guy, and also mixed in some. I will tell a personal story real quick. We played Poston Butte in the quarterfinals in 21, and I really thought we had a chance, and they ended up running clocking us, and I was already pretty much down about that as it was, but they ran some Veer stuff, and I was like, gosh, they've run this so well, and I think you said something that, oh, yeah, we put it in a couple weeks ago, and I was like, well, I should retire right now. We should hang it up at this point. But so we'll dive into that, tweaking your offense and doing some of those things. But first question that we always kind of talk to guys about: do you think it's most important to coach what you know, or to tailor your system to your personnel?
Wow, what a great question. I think it's a blend. I think that's, I think you have to coach what you know. You have to, because you have to believe in something. You have to believe in your philosophy of how you're gonna get kids to play hard and things like that. But I think that in today's offenses and defenses, you kind of do need to tailor it to who you have. Um, and I think that multiple offenses and multiple defenses schemes, as far as when you're starting, for me, like spring ball and summer ball and things like that, I think being a multiple team is really important because sometimes you don't know who you have until the first game. And I think that being able to have enough in that you can kind of like focus on a certain element is probably really important, but sometimes you don't know what that is until the kids kind of like show themselves.
That makes a ton of sense, Coach. being involved and being multiple in various different systems, what do you think about the way you install gives your offense an advantage?
Well, I think that especially when you're dealing with like an offense like the wing T and the Veer and how we've married it over the years that I've been coaching, um, I think that one of the key components is to know that you're going to probably see a defense that you haven't seen on film yet. And so to be able to make adjustments as you go um, is kind of the most important thing because lots of different teams are going to try to defend you differently. There's no right or wrong way. And a lot of it has to do with how their team's built up with their personnel and things like that. Coaches are smart. They use their queens. Like you only have one queen on the board and you got to use them correctly and things like that. So I think that each team that you play, they're going to have studs in different places. And I think that um, making sure that your offense is multiple enough that you can adjust to how they're trying to take things away and focus on something that they can't take away. You can't take everything away. We know that, like as a defensive guy, forever. Like I want to take away their best thing, but I know that that's going to leave me probably a little bit vulnerable somewhere else. And so, being able to see what they're trying to do to take away, and you don't have to keep pounding a square peg into a round hole. You can let them take that away and then make sure that you have something else that you can go to that's just as valuable to your offense or defense or whatever it is.
One of the things that I've always found interesting about, we obviously play Coach Young every year, and we've played a few wing T teams on the schedule. And I was hoping to get a little insight into this. What is the decision making process when you'll see teams that are buck sweep, buck sweep, buck sweep, and then maybe if they're getting a lot of A gap pressures or if they're getting that under front or what have you, they go into what I would describe as more power. It's just power sweep, but you get all the down blocks, you get the one back now, not faking, you're kicking, and then you're running the same type of action in the backfield. What is a determining factor in kind of doing that? And because I've seen teams really mix those teams that run that style, mix that play really effectively. Is there any thought process that goes into that? And if so, what is it?
Well, I mean, I think that like for me personally, I like to be good at both. I much prefer to run the wing T buck sweep and have both guards coming. But if teams are going to put a 6-man front and things like that that make it more difficult to fill up that backside A gap, if they got a stud coming down and you can't block back on them, or your fullback's just not fast enough to plug that backside and they cause issues. Um, and they're like that's what teams did historically to us a lot with a lot of inside slants on just crashing everything down to try to basically chase it from the backside. If you can secure that with the front side with the power game and you just leave that one guard there and you just lead with your fullback and it becomes more of a historical power game where you're just pulling one guard, you can shore up the front for sure, and it's a lot more safe. You might not have the dynamics of both guards getting out and the big play ability, but you can certainly find a way to, power some first downs and things like that. And I think that in big games, that's what I always talk about. It's like, it's all about getting first downs. And, I worry less about the big chunk plays in a big game. I worry a lot more about consistently being able to make first downs. So I want no negative plays. And so if leaking, taking two guards creates some leakage and we wind up with a negative play somewhere, I'm like, ooh, that's not a good thing, especially in, for a wing T team.
One of the things when we talked to Coach Young about installation of the wing T, he said, and I know a lot of the wing T guys, I heard Dan Dunn speak, and everything is in series, and he said they had a misdirection series, they had a power or downhill type of series, which is where his belly was in. And again, I'm not always super familiar, but we get that wing leading. You could have a cross block with that wing leading, but you're hitting that play. To me, when you're playing those teams, and I talked to this about Coach Young, that's one of the tougher ones to stop because it really feels difficult to be able to stop that for less than 3 or 4. And if they can stay on schedule, that makes that play really, really, really difficult. When you're installing the offense, and one of the things I always found interesting about you is, Coach, said a little bit that you'll take a back seat there in the spring and doing things in installation in terms of maybe making sure the kids are having some fun, enjoying those type of things. But how do you go about installing the offense?
So, like I like the way most wing T guys do it, like you were saying that in series and things, and that's basically because you mentioned that do you coach to what you know or do you coach to what you have? And I know like my installation I was taught from Coach Morrow always came in series. So if you were gonna install the buck sweep series, it was a trap and it was the inside sweep and the buck sweep that's outside. And I, we always called the inside sweep a down block. So that was, we would just, however you name it. Growing up in Coach Morrow's system, everything was numeric, so your wing T series, your buck series were all 20s, 21 and 22 were the inside trap and 27 and 28 were your buck sweeps. So it was he did each decade was a different series, and then the 50 series, for example, was all his Veers. Uh, and so that's how I've always installed things. So your traps are being installed at the same time as your buck sweeps because your back action. That's the biggest thing with when you're talking wing T stuff. It's all about misdirection, and so having the second back or the motion back or wherever is faking is trying to make sure that everything is really looks the same, whether you're hitting the trap or you're hitting the inside sweep or you're hitting the outside sweep, as well as the quarterback has to, have his legs because he's got to boot out every single time. And that's what, making that action look the same on everything is probably pretty key. As far as giving the illusion to the defense that they're really not, they got, certain players have to stop each play no matter what it is because they're not going to be able to tell what it is right away. But that's how we've always done it is, we'll work all the wing T stuff together when we first do it. But then, of course, when the season goes and we get, in season, we don't necessarily practice all the wing T plays together. We might be working traps and we might just be working inside run with the line and it's all traps. So it could be guard traps or tackle traps, and we're working them at the same time in different parts of the season. So once we learn a whole series of plays, then we kind of break it up and kind of move through things differently during the season. I don't know if
Coach,
that.
I'm unfamiliar with the difference between the regular buck sweep and the inside sweep. So coach
Yeah.
us up on that a little bit.
So like the whole pin and pull thing with um, the buck sweep, we wound up kind of changing how we call things because we get so many big fronts to try to stop the sweep. Um, and so basically, um, we will design basically the inside sweep. So it's going to be called. Like it's not going to be an option whether the guy's outside, whether we let somebody kick or if we can try to hook them and things like that. We're going to leave somebody alone no matter what, and we're not going to try to get outside when we call for our inside sweep, which would be our down block. And it's important that we call it that way because it does change the blocking a little bit up front. Typically on your buck sweep, your center is going to scoop and cover and pull towards the play side, but when we go down block, we block down, and so that means that the center is going to block back in certain situations. Obviously, if he's covered, he's going to keep his nose, but in an even front, he'll wind up blocking back instead of scooping the whole play side, because we know that we're going to turn it up no matter what. Um, and so it just kind of secures things a little bit. I think that the biggest thing is that it allows us to get super physical on the play side with um, the tackle and the tight end and their angles change a little bit because they know we're coming downhill, and the backs aren't reading anything. It doesn't matter how congested it feels. They're gonna turn it up, and sometimes it turns into a B gap play and they turn it up after their first step, and it comes really quick. Kind of like how counter does the same thing. It's that's going to feel a lot more like the counter, like we're kicking somebody out no matter what, and then we're pulling through. That's how we're going to run that inside sweep.
Coach, when we have played those teams, and this is probably just a question for me because I've always bounced back and forth when you get the tight end wing. Do we play the guy outside of the wing? Do we play the guy inside of the wing? What's giving you more trouble? And do you have different variations for a nine technique, a guy outside of the tight end that's a war daddy and he's giving you trouble? Are there different ways you're going to do that? You don't want to block down with the wing. You want him to come up the field. Or how do
Yeah,
you go about attacking a guy that's a stud out there on the edge?
Yeah, so I mean, and I think that's where that down block really comes into play, where we can force him to be the kick out guy all the time, and we don't try to get outside of him. If he's that guy, then we'll just let him be out there, and we hope that they're in their huddle, and their coach is praising them, going, "Hey, you're doing a great job setting the edge. They're not being able to get outside of you," and we're the whole time going, "Yeah, we're not even going to try to get outside of that guy. We're going to just run inside no matter what." We're going to just leave that guy to be the guy that's, out there. And then, because then a lot of times, like we, personnel wise, we've had those little slot backs, those little wing backs that have been big studs that are just stand up tight ends for us, like, your collegiate H back and things like that. But we've had little guys too. We've had like little receivers. We've had, uh, the, the year that we went to the state championship at Poston Butte, um, I kind of decided who our slot back was going to be before the season even started. I said, well, we got a kid that's a 4.3 GPA. He's the hardest working kid, and he can't, by the time he became a senior, he became a little bit more athletic, but, he was 145 pounds and he was tough, but he wasn't going to out bench press anybody but he was going to out try everybody. And I said, this guy's going to just cause problems for people because he'll never give up. But he was not a kid that we're going to ask to down block a single block on a defensive end or something like that. So we make him, we can always make those guys bonus players where they attach to the tight end. They don't touch anybody that the tight end's not touching. And so if the tight end's going to get under somebody, then that kid's got to be quick enough that he can step back on the tight end's heels and he can down block with them and not touch, because we never want him to solo block anything. But then we've had some other guys where, they're tight ends and we just put them in the wing. So we have an extra, basically tight end on the same side. And so we're able to block things a little bit different that way. But that's just all about personnel. I mean, it's probably been 50-50. If I have a choice, I want the extra tight end. Absolutely. But a lot of times I just want the best kid that's the toughest kid. And so we got to do some things a little bit differently with them. So, going back to what you talked about earlier, I'm not married to doing things one way. I've always done it to try to find a way to get the kids be successful. And if they can't be successful, then we got to find something else for them to do. And honestly, that's where like we break out of the wing all the time and we'll run slot formations or pro formations and just get that guy out of the way, because we know he can't really help us on a linebacker or anything like that. He's a typical wide receiver guy. He can stock block the heck out of people in space, but he's not going to be real physical in the box. And so we'll run all our wing T plays without the wing there, just to try to, formation people out. Like you've seen us, like, well, I make sure that we got, 25 formations in before we play our first game. So
That was one of the things I was going to get into next. Is I think one of the things that you guys have done differently than a lot of wing T teams is such a variety of formations and sets. That, and I always felt like your trap hit faster than about anybody I've seen at the 4A level. And to be honest, you don't really see trap at the 6A level anymore because everybody's in some variation of spread and not
yeah,
a great, just not as good a football play out of the gun, in my opinion. I mean, you've seen some NFL teams this year kind of run some false trap out of the gun, but I think it just hits so differently from under center than it does in the gun. But next question is, when you're looking at those formations, do you script your first few plays? And if so, what exactly are you looking for in that script in terms of a numbers advantage, or information you want to gather in that opening script that's going to assist you in the rest of the game?
Yeah, I do script. When I was calling the offense, I script about, like we work a script of probably 10 to 11 plays, um, but probably the first six are going to be absolute, and then the other ones might get shifted around a little bit because they could be more down and distance things. But for one thing, I like scripting because I like every time we do any kind of team stuff throughout the week that they're rehearsing. It's a dress rehearsal, and once their comfort goes up, I feel like that they can execute faster and more efficiently. So I do it for the kids' sake because they know, hey, we're hitting this. It's a team session or whatever. They know the first five plays. By the second time we're doing it, the quarterback's comfortable. He doesn't even need me to signal him in. Sometimes he might have it on a wristband or whatever so that he can look at them and, see them over and over again. But I do want to see how teams are going to line up mostly to our tight end. And then, if we have a big slot back, a lot of teams will adjust to that slot back rather than the tight end. So it might be that they're going to do things to our strength wherever that guy goes, regardless of where the tight end is. And so I make sure that I run a couple formation with the tight end and the wing together. I make sure that I have them split so it almost looks like two tight end situations. So I want to see where they go with that. And then also I want to see what they do differently when we're in single back. So in my top five plays, I'm always going to break out of the wing tee, the classic wing tee, and make sure that I'm in shotgun or make sure I'm in a single back set just to see that I can, see what their defense is doing.
So, Coach, walk us through a typical game plan. How do you go about game planning? What's your There's a lot of different ways to do it. I certainly came up in the era where we were all in there for all day Saturday doing this. I've kind of altered that a little bit, let guys do a lot of their work on their own. But walk us through how you go about game planning, and there's some coaches, and I would fall into this category. This is a big pet peeve of mine, is when somebody comes in on Tuesday and goes, "We should run this." I go, "No, no, no, absolutely not. That's not happening. Don't ask again." Does everything have to be good by Monday, or how do you go about establishing that with your coaches?
So the way we ran it when I was in charge is Saturday was a practice for the whole team, and we would come in a lot like you would and bring the kid in. We'd stretch. It wouldn't be like a hard practice, but we got to get them up, get them fed, get ice on their boo-boos and all those kind of things, and make sure that if there's something that shows up, because after Friday's adrenaline wears off, there's injuries that nobody knew about, and so we kind of want to see where we're at with that, um, and then kind of make our little list of who's going to be questionable for the next week or not, who we're going to have for sure, and and make some alternative plans as far as personnel. I've never coached at like a 6A level or anything big like that where it's just the next, if you miss a guy, you miss a guy. Well, in all the levels that I've coached, if you miss a guy, now you're missing a special teams player, you're missing an offensive starter and a defensive backup, and so we got to make sure that we have our personnel right, and and then we go over the previous week's game with the kids. Like we'll watch film and see what we did well and see what we need to fix and things like that. For me, at that point, we had some coaches would stay and watch film there at school because sometimes people's houses are pretty chaotic, and some people are more comfortable going home and watching film. You might have little kids; it's important to be around them and watch film at night. I was always that person when my kids were little. Is during the day I needed to be with them, and I would stay up until 3 a.m. if I needed to watch film and break things down and stuff like that. But I didn't want to take away from the kids, my kids. And so I never wanted to put that in any of my coaches into a situation where they were going to take away family time. And so I've always had enough coaches. I've been very fortunate to have really good assistant coaches that, took it upon themselves to get a lot done. But then we would come back as a staff and meet on Sunday evenings. Um, and sometimes, it was always kind of up to the coaches that had the littlest kids what time we met. If it was at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock or whatever, some of them wanted to have dinner with their families, and then we would meet. Um, but that gave me a chance to kind of get my game plan situated. When I was the coordinator, I was always talking to Coach Morrow, whoever, and letting them know what I was thinking about this side, and the same thing. When I was on the offensive side and my assistant coach was the defensive coach, I would call him up or send some text messages. Hey, this is what I seen. You got some thoughts. I really think that we can attack here, or just kind of throughout the weekend giving them some ideas. And I would do the same thing when I was calling the offense. I'd make sure my line coach text me throughout the weekend. Hey, I see this, I see this, I think we should really go after this kid. This is their weak spot, this is their stud. And so by Sunday night, the two coordinators would pretty much have things squared away, and then we would come together so that we could get input, make sure everybody liked what we were doing and where we're at and things like that, what was going to be the target, um, who were, what kind of plays we were going to run offensively, defensively. If there was any new plays or any tweaks to a play or anything like that, make sure that everybody was on pace and things like that. And then also, okay, JVs, guys, this is probably some things that you should think about doing to stop them or whatever. Don't do this because this is how we're starting the game. So I don't want you to show that or whatever. But kind of like script things through for the different levels to make sure that we're all on the same page. And if we're changing things up or whatever, we're going to do something different on the varsity level. We want to make sure that the JVs aren't showing our hand a little bit early and things like that. And that would happen mostly for offenses that were very different or whatever scripted. If we were going to do something way different, something that we hadn't shown and things like that. But that kind of bounces back into being really multiple, and and teaching kids different ways to do things throughout the summer and preseason and things like that. And I think it makes us a little bit, and made us a little bit easier to adjust to things or change things throughout the weeks, because we had already put in things. So it wasn't like we're inventing the wheel again. It's stuff that we had run all summer in sevens and things. We just hadn't used the 3-3 stack much, but we ran it during sevens. And now all of a sudden this week we're running a 3-3 stack. Same thing would happen with the offense. It's like, okay, we haven't run, like you alluded to at the beginning there, like when we played you guys the one time, that we're always a Veer team, but we're always an inside Veer team. And then we'd put in the outside Veer, and it's mostly because we're getting ready to play an odd front who has a dude on the edge that they become an ass kicker, and like, okay, this guy loves to do this, we're gonna try to take advantage of something that they hadn't seen before. And then we put in the outside Veer so it hits a little bit wider, and now the guy that's usually taking the quarterback is the one that has to decide if he's taking the dive or not. And so those would be kind of the things that we think, okay, is this the time that we're going to put this in? Is this the time that we're going to make those adjustments and things like that? So,
Coach, that brings me into the next topic, because a lot of wing T guys I've talked to really weren't super comfortable with mixing in the Veer. They thought you kind of had to marry the Veer. You guys have always done it really, really well. Obviously, you said that was Coach Morrow's 50 series. Walk us through how you drill that, and it always seemed like you had a quarterback that was able to mix those really well. Is it because maybe the passing game wasn't crazy sophisticated, that he had more time to commit to that? Because to me, there's only so many things you can get good at, and I think that's one of the more impressive things that you guys have done. Is done a lot of. There were many times where I was like, well, here, saw you guys in film, and you're going, well, here comes Buck Sweep, but they're not going to stop it for less than 7 or
yeah.
8, and then you were able to mix in the Veer, and talk to us about the difference between your inside Veer and your outside Veer, if you could.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's start with um, finding time. Like, there's only so much time. Well, I think a big part of it is being a program And so you got to be able to start things when they're freshmen. And the freshman offense can be very, very small and almost unsophisticated compared to your varsity offense. But you want to make sure that the kids that are playing certain positions are already being trained. And even in the freshmen, if you don't have a running quarterback that can run Veer, we still need to be able to train certain actions and things like that, because like I know it's happened to me. Like one of the best quarterbacks we ever had at Blue Ridge, his freshman year, he was the tight end. In his 8th grade year, he was an offensive guard. And by the time he was a senior, he was running the option like nobody's business and won a state championship for us. So a lot of times kids change, obviously when they're, as they grow and things like that. But for instance, like if we want to run the Veer at some point, possibly, when they're freshmen, they're just running ISO the whole time and they don't have an option. There is no reading or anything like that, but the action and riding the quarterback or riding the fullback and then giving it to them is going to stay the same. And then they're going to fake like like they have the ball and like it's an option the whole time. Um, you're not going to get scouted as well on the freshman level, so it can be just as effective to make that belly. Like some people run the ISO like it's a belly ISO. We always ran the ISO like it's Veer, so we open to the hole and set the ball, ride it the long as you possibly can is what we tell the we teach all these things with the quarterbacks, but the big thing is so that it looks the same and so they feel real comfortable about holding the ball back and riding in. And that's one of the preludes to being good is you have to be able to hold it in there as long as you possibly can before you make your decision. Well, we take some of the decision making out of it when they're young. It's like, oh no, it's a give. Like you're going to just take off afterwards like it's option, but it's a give every single time. And we might do things where we run, the ISO and it's a keep. And now instead of the ISO back leading through to, to ISO the linebacker, he's leading off the edge a little bit. And so he's basically hooking the edge so the quarterback can keep it. So now he's reading and looks just like the ISO all the time, but our angle changes a little bit for the lead back. And now the quarterback's going to ride as long as he can. He's not making any decisions. And then he's a keep. Okay. And so like when they're younger, we can call it as coaches. Now, obviously, we don't want to have to call it. We want them to be able to make that decision on their own. And so it can transform into Veer when they get a little bit older. Um, Now, I think that so you can take, you can teach them footwork and all those kind of things that keeps the same when they're freshmen and sophomores. And it might not be till their junior year that they're actually reading it. And so we just spend some time making sure that your eyes are in the right place. You're looking at the defensive player and they don't have to search for the running back, but now their footwork's already clean. They already feel that ride and glide and things like that. Um, so, if you have a brand new quarterback, somebody that transferred in or something like that, it's going to be a lot of work outside of practice time that, maybe after they're done lifting, you got to steal 5 minutes and just, walk through the footwork and things like that for them. But I think that, I think you can find time. You were a magician with time when I coached for you. Like I was always impressed on how quickly we could get done with things because things went fast and stuff like that. And so I think that using the off season to teach drills and how to run drills and things like that's really important. We run Veer drills all the time, and we'll teach them in the spring, and we'll hit them throughout the summer. Just the 8-minute session on just how to do it, so that the next the next quarterback's up, so that once we're getting into game mode, we're not teaching drills or anything like that. And so I think that that's really important as far as program wise goes. And then you got younger players that get to see the older kids that have already kind of gotten good at it. They get to see them work, or in the summer, where we practice our freshmen separate. So during the season, they never get to see each other play, but they get to see each other practice in the summer. And I think that modeling and teaching drills is really important before the season really starts. So that was the long-winded answer as far as how you find time. You got to make sure that you do it before you need it. As far as the inside and outside veer goes, it's basically where, so a veer for us, we have to have a double team and we always step to a triple team. So um, if it's the inside veer, it's going to be um, the guard's job is to be in the double team. If it's the outside veer, it's the tackle's job to be in the double team. And for us, the only way we run any kind of outside veer is if we have to have somebody attached to the tackle. So we need to have a tight end or we have to have a slot that's attached. Either way, we can run it, but we have to make sure that there's a potential for a double team. If the player is outside shade of the tackle, we can't get a double team. So he has to be head up or inside, and then we can run our outside veer. Same thing with a inside veer. It's going to be head up or inside the guard. So if it's a 3 technique, then likely we're going to leave that guy. But if it's a 3 technique, we're probably going to be running outside veer anyway, just because that's where we want to hit. So we want to make sure those angles are right. Because it's going to be difficult to actually block it down if the guy's playing in the gap or something like that. Unless you have a tackle that's a stud and we find out that he overwhelms the block all the time, then we can still run it against a 3 technique. So, and then ultimately, really, play calling is about, for me, with those kind of plays, same thing with trap. And it's about making sure that the quarterback knows what we're doing, because we like to do a lot of things where we get a check and we can run it either way. So if we're running a team that's playing a 1 and a 3 or moving those guys around, sometimes those are 2s, we'll run a lot of checks where the quarterback just gets to decide which side we're running trap to. Like, okay, we teach them what a 3 technique is, and there's our 3 technique. That's who we're trapping. Or here's our 1 technique. We're going to run inside veer against this 1 technique. And so you got to find where the 1 technique, and we make some calls, on the line right there where we know if we're going left or right then.
Interesting stuff, Coach. I appreciate that. I learned a ton there on that. Next question is, and I've talked about this a lot on the show. I would have no problem being an assistant again, but the biggest issue that I would struggle with is not being in charge of the practice plan. I could coach in wing tee, spread, power. I mean, you name it. I could do that. Not a problem. There's state championships are won every single year in the double wing or the
Sure.
5 wide or the run and shoot or whatever. So I don't think that would be a huge factor. The thing I would struggle with is not being able to say, hey, this 10-minute indie is 10 minutes. It's not. I've been on some staffs and where I was like, that was supposed to be a 10-minute indie and it was 35 minutes.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
had running backs and I was like, I only got 7 of them. They're about dead now at this point because we've been
Yeah.
running ball drills for 37 minutes.
Yeah.
So, but walk me through a typical practice week, how you go about scripting it, and practice planning, length, periods, all those type of issues.
Yeah. So, recently, obviously in the last number of years, I had my number 2 guy is basically my associate head coach, Coach Holmes, who's now the head coach. Like I would meet with him, like, what do we need? Like, how much time do you want on defense? What do you want your periods to be like? So I ask him what he wants. And so certain days we do basically like a variable schedule where we bounce back and forth, offense and defense, whether it's indie time or group time or team time, and we bounce back and forth. And then some practices are going to be primary offense or primary defense. And interesting enough, a lot of it has to do with all my assistant coaches. I think that I've been uh, I had done it long enough where I saw benefits and weaknesses to all different types. But the biggest thing for me was having quality coaches. And I didn't, I'd love to have every coach on campus, with the schedule that I have and things like that. But I pulled lots of coaches from the community and things like that. And so certain days we've done night practices and things like that. And so basically our schedule turned into Mondays and Tuesdays were going to be night practices because I had my whole staff. there. And then Wednesdays and Thursdays would be after school because I wasn't going to have my whole staff there anyway. And so when I have my whole staff there on Mondays and Tuesdays, there was a lot more individual time going on, a lot more teaching, a lot more instructions and things like that. And then we saved a lot more of the team dynamics and the group dynamics to Wednesday. And it turned out to be a really good thing. Now that I say that, but that doesn't mean that we didn't do some team stuff on Mondays and Tuesdays, because we would. Um, and so typically a Monday would look like warm-ups, and we try to do, like, if we're doing any kind of passing and stuff like that, and we're totally out of stretching with the whole team and things like that. We've given that up. We've tried to save time, but we do some team stuff together. So we come together. So um, we have pre-practice warm-ups where the quarterbacks are getting loose, throwing, receivers are running routes. There might be a certain route that the receiving coach, Coach Tucker, one of your receivers, he helped us with the wide receivers this year, Coach Usher. So we were lucky to have him come in. And so like something that didn't go right the week before, maybe our curl route wasn't getting high enough before the breakdown or whatever. So he would have one side where every time they rotated through, he was making sure that on one group that they were running nothing but curl routes, okay, or whatever the route was. So there was going to be something specific in pre-practice that he was going to be working on. When they jumped to each of the other lines, they're running a whole variety of different routes so the quarterbacks could throw everything. But we're going to be specific on this one thing right here. And then so we would get something done right there. The linemen would be warming up with the line coaches, doing agility drills, stretching, some of their pre-practice non-contact type stuff. And we're using all those kind of things for stretch. The linemen would get quite a bit of that going. They get a little sweat going with bag work and things like that. And then we blow the whistle to start practice basically, and the backs and receivers and D-backs and running backs would all go into their position group. And obviously, if they're a two-way player, they're either a running back or a linebacker. They're one or the other, and that's who they stretch with each day. And then that way, each position coach could find their group, and they only have about 2 minutes to stretch. So they're getting a couple extra groin stretches, making sure they're heated up good before we start. The linemen are probably getting more water during that 2 minute period because they're probably already done with all their warm-ups. But it gives their position coach, because they're running routes, you can't really talk to them all. So that gives their position coach, something to talk to them about. Okay, like, hey, we were bad about this yesterday, or we were good about this yesterday. So that 2 minute period, and then basically we blow the whistle and we get them into their big lines. And this would be the lines that they have that would look like your typical stretch lines and stuff like that. But we're really not going to stretch during that. We're gonna do a couple concentration things with jumping jacks and things like that. If they get them, sometimes I'll bet them. Like, I'll bet you 10 push-ups you guys aren't going to get these jumping jacks right or whatever. And then if they get it, then I do the push-ups. If they don't, then they do them or whatever. Or we'll have some little real token punishment type thing if they can't concentrate and somebody messes it up. And then we condense our lines, and that would be the time where I would have about 1 minute to just address the team, like something, like any kind of announcements and things like that. Or something like, hey, might change, because I would post the practice plans in the locker room. But if something changed, hey, Coach so-and-so is caught in traffic, we're not here, so this was where we're starting, but we're switching it up, because it seems like those kind of things happen all the time. And so that gave me a chance to have the whole team there, to make some sort of quick address to them. And then we're basically get a break, and then we're into basically what we would call a start fast drill. So now we're going to sprint again somewhere. We might just do, like we call lightning sevens, where they're going to get 3 30-yard sprints, and they're racing each other. And it's, there's no prize, but it's bragging right. They're in speed groups or whatever. Or we're going to hit some sort of special teams, like we're going to blow the whistle on punt coverage or punt return or something like that. And it's going to be like a 5-minute blow where, it could be a defensive oriented pursuit drill, something where we're getting them to sprint right off the bat and get them lathered up a little bit. And I like to, it gets hot, but water's always available. If they need to bow out of a drill and get water, it's just there. We try to give them a bunch of opportunities to get water throughout. And every once in a while we'll have a big water break where they take their helmets off and stuff like that. But a lot of little ones where somebody's still doing a drill and they're getting water and it's available and the wagon's out there and they can just, get water bottle drinks whenever they need to, kind of thing. So we try not to do a whole lot of big breaks, but when it's super hot, we do take our helmets off. And like, I'll let them know, this is a 5-minute break. You can take your helmets off. You can splash water on your shoulder pads. You can do whatever you want. I'll blow the whistle when it's 1 minute left so that you're ready to go. Otherwise, they know they can take their helmets off, get a drink, splash their head or whatever, and get ready to work again. So we'll do that quickness or start fast or quickness drills or whatever to kind of, some sort of speed kill things where we're getting going. And then basically we're into whatever. If we're going to be a defensive primary, then we're finding our defensive position coach. Sometimes on those days, we might be doing like a tackling carousel, especially early in the season, where we're doing, 3 drills and each one's 2 minutes, and they're just going from coach to coach. Somebody's on the whistle and they're blowing it and going to the next one. And a lot of times when we do that, if we have everybody together, there's going to be like 2 coaches at each group, where it's going to be an older guy and a younger guy, and they're going to do the same drills. They're mimicking them. But that way the younger guys can watch the older guys do it also, and they can kind of see what the tackling drill looks like. But again, all these things we want to have already taught them in summer, when there's no pads, they want to know what the drill is. So when we say what the drill's name is, they know if this is, if this is gator rolls, they know exactly what it should look like, the setup and everything. They should, if it's, if we're running a sideline juke drill or whatever, they know exactly what it's going to look like on a cutback or whatever. And then a lot of times, typically, if it's defense, we're going to do indie time. And then at some point, it's going to be a group time where now we're going to have a 10-minute period on inside run. The linebackers are going to be with the defensive line, and the D-backs are going to have more time by themselves. And they could be working on more skills and drills, or that might be game specific. Like we're doing 7s without the linebackers, and here's the plays that they run, and here's the combinations that we need to really worry about and things like that. And then we might bounce back to the linebackers, might go back with the D-backs and do a real 7 skull drill. And then at that point now it's pass rush, that the defensive line are just on strict pass rush. And they have a 10-minute period or 8-minute period right there. And then we might come together and do a little bit of team time. Early in the year or early in the week, the team time is going to be really short. And then typically on Tuesdays, that team time, we might say, hey, these are, if we're going to do something live, it's going to be like, you got 7 plays. This is going to be our live set right there. And it's going to be coming in the middle of practice. And then we're going to basically do the same thing with offense. It's very rare that we have an all offense or all defense practice. We do everything every day, just because we have so many players that even if they're not both ways, they're the second team guy, and they're going to play. They're going to play all the time. I mean, I love to be in a platoon time where like this is just an offensive day, but I feel like the defense gets only so much opportunities to get better every day, and I hate to give them a day off and not getting better. And so we focus on both sides of the ball pretty much every single day.
Coach, I love that idea of talking to your guys about making sure they know the drill, and naming the drill is something that is, it seems so obvious, but like you said, gator rolls go, and they should be able to do that. You don't want to be explaining the drills, and that's why I think you got to have a finite number of drills. If you have 1 million drills because you saw something on Twitter or Instagram, I mean, that's awesome, but you're spending a lot of time teaching, not a lot of time doing in that case.
Yeah. I think that those drills need to like have a reason for them, and then like like you said, like if you need to whittle some down or combine some and make a new drill with two of them combined together, then that's really important. But just doing them to waste, because then it just feels like you're wasting time. It's like I want them to like be getting better at some facet that's going to show up on Friday night. And if it's not going to show up on Friday night, then why are we doing it? Like, then that's just called calisthenics. Like, okay, it's warm ups. Okay, then that can be done in the weight room.
I've seen some coaches talk about, and this was something that struck with me because I don't know that I've done a great job of this in adding a level of difficulty or complexity to a drill. It being the same drill, but adding, like, for example, I always use offensive lineman for an example, but we'll start with a combo block on one defender. And we're not even worried about sliding off at that point. And then we'll slowly add the linebackers. The linebackers got bags. And then maybe later in the year, it's limited reps, but we're doing it where the defensive lineman's going at them and they're taking that rep and our backers. So trying to do the same thing, but add a level of complexity and difficulty as you go about it. One of the things, Coach, that you told me, and I think I've tried to utilize when we've been able to get into the playoffs a little bit and win a game, and as you advance further, that I believe you talked about, Coach Mora talking about this. It was basically the idea of dance with who brung you. And as you get deeper into the playoffs, you really got to do what's best. An interesting side note on this, Coach Brusso, our normal co-host here, was on this. It was a really fun game for me to watch, but it was like, oh man, I want both of them to win. But he was coaching at Casa Grande when they played Coach Thompson's Poston Butte Broncos in the state championship, and obviously I have a great relationship with Coach Holmes. So it was, and Coach Brusso, one of my favorite all-time players too, and was coaching at Casa Grande. That was an interesting dynamic for me. I was downtown at Acker night. My daughter was doing a little dance. I had my phone out. I'm watching the state title game. It was fun stuff. But anyhow, the question is I think the tendency for coaches is maybe to add a wrinkle or add too much. But how do you dance with who brung you, as we're saying, but also maybe make it look different to the defense or add an element to the defense that they haven't seen before?
Yeah, I think most of those kind of things, by the time you're into the playoffs, you have things that you've probably practiced all year. Like, you don't have to like put new things in, but you have like these little wrinkle things like that. At least it's been my past history, that it's like, okay, now like you have these three little, special plays that, like a boot throwback or something like that. And you just haven't had a time to put it in, haven't had time to run it yet. It's never shown up. Well, now I think in the playoffs now, it's like as a play caller, it's like we've practiced these things all the time, all year. Like now I'm kind of more, instead of saving it, I'm finding a time to use it. Like I have the little nest egg right here of cool 2-point conversions or whatever. Well, they don't all necessarily, you don't have to wait for the 2-point conversion. Obviously you want to keep one of them or whatever, but that's been my history, is that the playoffs are fun because you have these things that you've practiced and the kids are good at it. Like every time you run into practice, it works. Now it's time to not save it anymore. Now it's time to throw it in there. And I've been lucky enough that we've had that kind of situation happen as an assistant coach for a lot of years, where it's like, okay, we haven't had this, throwback or a halfback pass or whatever your gimmick play is that, is off your wing tee, or if it's, it's a little boot action or whatever, or some of it's stuff that you might have used at the beginning against a specific team and you haven't shown it since. And it's like, okay, well, this little pop pass is going to really be dynamic against the way they run their cover three or whatever. And so like, it's like, okay, this is back in, like we're going to really make sure that we find a time to run this. But I do think that like your dudes need the ball and you need to make sure that you don't, out coach yourself. I've been lucky enough to win a playoff game against somebody when I was playing that we had no business playing with. We want to making a run at a state championship, and we played two teams we had no business beating, and one of them was they started throwing the ball and doing some things that's not what they were averaging 10 yards a carry. And I'm like, and we wound up with 5 picks during the game. It's like, okay, that changes the game. You just beat somebody that you had no business beating because they got bored of running 10 yards every time they handed the ball off to a kid. Like, I don't understand. I'll never understand that. I run the same play over and over again if I can.
I watched you. One of the only times, Coach, I was rooting against one of your teams, I'll tell you, was that 21 season. We had gotten by Bradshaw in the first round, and we both ran the ball, so I think the game was over at 8:45.
Yeah.
And we get on the computer screen, and we're watching you guys play Northwest Christian, and if
Oh, yeah.
Northwest Christian's got the lead late, and we're like, dude, we got a home game in the quarters next week if Northwest Christian wins. And I was like, come on. It was Beth Christian, and you guys ran buck sweep all the way down the field in like 2 minutes an hour. I was like, how can I just stop it once, please?
Yeah. 2 minutes. It was that was our 2-minute drill.
It was wild. It was fun watching. The other thing I thought you brought up there that was really, I try to talk to our coaches a little bit about, is practicing those special calls beforehand. Because in my experience, I think sometimes coaches' egos get in the way a little bit. They think they always have the perfect call in that really high pressure situation. And I'm not sure that's true. I think having that bullet ready for what I would call gotta have it. So it's 4th down. If you don't get this first down, you lose the game. That you've practiced this play before. And again, that gotta have it can't be in the first quarter when it's tied, or even in the third quarter when it's tied. It's gotta be, you get this, you still have a chance to win the game. You don't get this, the game's over and you've lost. But I think having those calls before, or things that you've previously done, is critical to that. But last question here. I could sit and talk all day, but last question we're going to go. We always finish this with this one. If you had to pick 5 concepts total, run and pass, to install in an offense, what would they be?
Okay. Well, like, you got to run trap. To me, you got to be able to run trap, because like it's so right now, and there's nothing more infuriating to a defensive coach than when trap busts you. Like, I mean, and so like you have to be able, and plus I really believe in trap, because um not always do you have that back that's the smooth zone guy that can set things up, but you can find somebody, like you alluded to my son. He was not the greatest athlete in the world, or the fastest or biggest or strongest, but if you got a kid that's got some heart and that can go, like, you got to believe in your teammates, like and if you got somebody that can just hit a hole, like, it's like a no-brainer. Like, trap is just one of those things that keeps people honest. They can't do a lot of crazy things because they got to make sure the triangle's sound right there, and so they can't just separate people and let people run and go get everything else. So that's my number one. Like, I got to be able to run trap. I have to be good enough at whatever my play action, or whatever my go-to run play is, that I have to have a play action off it. It's easy with wing T, because you have the waggle that comes out of it, and so like I love the waggle, some sort of play action that goes, that boots the quarterback out, because I'm always looking for an athletic quarterback that can run and pass. And so and the waggle is great because it's the layered concept and things like that, but it also typically has one of your best athletes with the ball in his hands in space. And like, I don't care if they ever throw it. Like, if they get outside of the edge and they can run it every single time. But it's just it's kind of like um, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, defensively, you're putting some people in some questionable positions and things like that. So, and if you're not a wing team, and you're if you're a shotgun and like you're a zone guy, you got to be able to run some sort of rollout against the run action that makes it like a legitimate boot run pass option off the edge. So those are my top 2 right there for sure. I guess my next thing would be I guess I'm just a Veer guy. I got to be able to run triple option, like some sort of triple option, uh, whether it's like the zone read type stuff in shotgun, um, and RPO attached to it, or under center, and it's the true Veer option. Like I got to be able to put some defensive players in some issues. They got to be able to make plays and be responsible. They can't just be athletes out there. They got to know jobs, and a lot of guys, a lot of players, a lot of coaches have a hard time with limiting their players to responsibility football. And so I think that some sort of option is the next one. Like for me, it's Veer, but we ran some zone read and things like that too, and like your stretch power read, like that kind of stuff is the same thing, just kind of outside Veer and reverse. And I thought you were always great at that, so I think that puts pressure on defenses to be you know to establish their rules so that they can't just put their athletes to just try to be better athletes than you and run amok. They have to have rules, or else they're going to get beat with option plays. I guess my number three thing is, or that was three. My number four thing would be to make sure that I teach my quarterback to be able to audible, and I say that not audible out of certain plays, but like I mentioned before, to be able to check so that we can run a certain play either way, so that they know, so that they can make me look good, and they can be right at a higher percentage of the time than I can be right just by calling it. Because we have, like I alluded to earlier, every week, when you run something that's different, that's good, you're going to see different coaches try to defend it differently, and they surprise you sometimes. And you don't want to be running your best play into the side of the defense where it's loaded for it. We want to be able to run trap either way. We want to be able to run inside Veer either way, so that we can take advantage of if they're shifting over one way or the other. So that would be number four. And then number five, I guess, is to make sure that your Jimmies and Joes are getting the touches that they need. I mean, just in general. I remember, there's a couple of years we've had like tight ends that, like, we had a great tight end, and Connor Lopez is just like an outstanding athlete. I had a list of Connor plays. Like, he's my tight end. He's a great blocker, but I got to get him the ball. I got to do some things to make sure he can touch the ball too, because he's that good. And when you're a run-heavy offense, making sure your tight end gets the ball 6 times a game or something like that is, like, if you don't have it scripted somehow, you don't have it written down or whatever, like, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that he is that guy. And so I would say that to make sure that you have a hit list for your dudes, to make sure that they're getting the ball somehow. That would be number five.
Well, Coach, like I said, I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, and coaches out there, this is one of my favorite episodes. Really enjoyed chatting with Coach, talking about some things, and I learned a ton as always. So we encourage everybody, again, please like and subscribe, do all that stuff, and we will see you next week on another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show.